Welcome everybody in Facebook land and fans of Boston Sci-Fi. We're here with the Decomposing Sci-Fi panel. We've got a group of wonderful composers of films from our festival here. I should mention all of them are still available or upcoming to see, except for Shot in the Dark, which was one of our opening night films. So we'll post the schedule up at some point so you can see when they're occurring. Let me go around and just briefly introduce everybody here. We have Edward Farmer here from London. And Edward's a wonderful composer besides Beyond Existence, his film that's screening here. He is also the co-composer of the current Julia Child film, which I wanted to mention because it was filmed around the corner from where I live here. They turned the south end of Boston into 1960s Greenwich Village. He's also an extremely busy orchestrator. He's worked on The Crown and Birds of Prey, and also the upcoming Julia Child doc as well. You're involved in both Julia Child projects. Is that right?
Sorry, just one actually.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Which one was it? The doc? What was that?
Working with Rachel Portman. It was roughly.
Oh, on the feature. Great.
Yeah.
Cool. Next we have Alexander. Sorry. Next, we have Alexander Taylor. He's the composer of two films actually in the festival, A Shot in the Dark and The Glazer. And he's also the award-winning composer of Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street, and the composer of the upcoming Paramount Plus film, Unknown Dimension, the story of paranormal activity. We have next Ariel Marx, another member of the LA contingent here. Ariel scored a couple of my films I really love from the last couple of years, including Shiva Baby and this excellent Laura Dern film on HBO called The Tale that I encourage everybody to check out. And finally, Erwann Chandon, last but not least, he's the 2021 Michel Legrand Prize winner for his score for Simon's Got a Gift, which is playing at the festival here. He's also scored the comedy Quand on crie au loup. How was that, Erwann? Not too bad? Is that as good as your English? And also won the Best Music Award at the Athens Anima Fest for his score to La Bague à Doigt. So I'll just get right to the first questions here. I'm going to start with Edward. So actually, I mean, all of you really, as composers, have focused most of your career on film, if not all of your career on film, which to me makes you, a filmmaker as much as a composer. And I was wondering if each of you could kind of tell us a little bit of, what inspired you to become a film composer, what films or film scores, maybe from your childhood or whatever, inspired you to go down this route.
Sure. Well, firstly, thanks very much for inviting us to talk today. It's a pleasure to be a part of the festival. Your question about what brought me into film, I think it probably started with theatre, and it probably started with storytelling. I did a lot of acting growing up, always involved in theatre productions in one way or another. And the jump over to film was just a different medium of storytelling rather than necessarily me being a filmmaker. And that led to, I was always musical, and therefore my default role in the theatre would be musical director or writing underscore for theatre productions. That led to a degree in composition, which led to a bit of study of orchestration, conducting, assisting other composers with their recording of their film scores, and eventually writing my own film scores. So it was a kind of organic pathway, if you like, rather than I didn't wake up when I was 6 years old and say, I want to be a film composer. It was a process of music, storytelling. Okay, this seems like the right way to go.
Do you enjoy theater or film more? Or?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think now, naturally, having begun working in the industry, I'm much more of a film buff than I am a theater buff. But I suppose it's the drama of the filmmaking process that I gravitate towards. The script. I'm not so hot on the cinematography side of things. I appreciate it when it's brilliant, but I couldn't tell you the right end of a camera from the wrong end of camera, if that makes sense. I'm sure there are some filmmakers who are very technically gifted and understand the process of making film specifically, but I guess I resonate more with the the story side of it, the script side of things, the characterization things.
Excellent. So let me pose that same question to you, Alexander.
Sure. Yeah, mine. My story is not too different from Edward's, actually. Wait, that side. There we go. Yeah, I actually studied motion picture production at Wright State University. I was always like, I love filmmaking. I actually wanted to be a director. And while I was there, I was the only one with a musical background. So, like, out of necessity to save money, I just ended up scoring everything that I did, or like everything that, you know, my other classmates would do, because I was the cheapest person that they knew firsthand. So that's kind of where I started doing it. So I ended up graduating from college having scored like 20 short films. And I didn't realize how lucky I was to even be able to do that. I also thought like there's no way that you could make a career out of doing this because it's so much fun. And then that's all I've been doing since I moved out to LA. But initially, I wanted to be a rock star. That's why I have all the guitars. So that's kind of how like the people at Wright State found out that I can do music, because I would be in bands all the time, or like I'd play shows for, like we did Rocky Horror Picture Show and Hedwig and the Angry Inch and a bunch of other stuff like that throughout college. So that's kind of what gave people the clue that I kind of know how to write music. So yeah, that's more or less my background. Yeah. I think you're muted, Rob.
How about you, Ariel?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, again, I didn't wake up at 6 years old knowing that I wanted to do this, and you kind of just, you don't fall into it, but everyone kind of has their different way into the industry, which I think is always really, really fun. You know, I was always a musician, kind of cycling through different instruments my entire life. And then I ultimately realized that I enjoyed collaborative composition. So basically with a narrative prompt, I really loved this, a narrative influence for the music. And so, I found that more inspiring, writing based on a story or based on a prompt versus just writing for writing's sake. And so that's what really led me to wanting to collaborate with storytellers. I ended up going to NYU for graduate school, where I've met Rob before. And so I went through their screen scoring program, and very much like Alexander, I scored many, many short films while I was there with graduate students at Tisch and Columbia and all around New York. And those connections and experiences kind of led me to where I am today. It's pretty amazing. I can trace every single gig from, a handful of short films. So that's been really neat to see, to evolve with filmmakers in that way. So, and you asked about some influences. I guess early on I was just mesmerized by Bernard Herrmann and Ennio Morricone. I would say would be my biggest film score influences. But yeah, I don't think I missed anything.
Okay, I remember my first contact with film music. It was I must have been 6 or 7. We have this vinyl in the family house, which was called Les Musiques des Grands Westerns, great Western musics, where with music of Ennio Morricone, Dimitri Tiomkins, Leonard Bernstein, and I couldn't stop listening it. It was just the epicness of this music. I didn't even know the films, but I just loved the music. And after I remember my first strike with when I saw a film was Jurassic Park. I was 8, and I was struck by the music and the interaction with the film. And I remember as soon as came back in my house, I tried to play the main theme on the piano, and badly, I think. But it's the moment I think I was struck by the music and the image. After I did that with Back to the Future, Braveheart, Edward Scissorhands, Hook, all that kind of film who have this something big with the orchestra. I fell in love with the orchestra before the film, and after I saw many films, and I understand how the music could work with the narration, the storyline, and then being when I was a teenager, I was a drummer in death metal bands, so not really the same, but as music for film. But I had always this fascination. I was fascinated by the orchestra, but I couldn't imagine that I will be able one day to do that thing as a drummer or. But little by little, I authorized myself to compose a little with softwares. And after I go to the conservatory and learn how to orchestrate, to be a chef, to diriger with the orchestra, and voila.
Excellent. I'm going to get a hand of this mute button here pretty quickly too. I was just going to mention, Ariel had mentioned Bernard Herrmann. We're showing a double feature of Bernard Herrmann movies here at the theater today, The Day the Earth Stood Still and Jason and the Argonauts. So many people, big fans of Bernard Herrmann. So I guess we'll go to the clips now. I had asked each of the composers here to bring a couple of clips from their films to talk about how they can use the music to influence the story, and even in some cases bring out things that aren't evident or emphasize certain aspects of it. So let's start with you, Edward, again, and Violet will bring up one of your clips. Maybe you want to give a quick introduction, or do you want to just talk about it afterwards? Maybe a quick introduction would be good.
Okay, sure. This is very early on in the film. There's almost no information about what's going on at this point. So yeah, let's watch it.
Here am I. So Edward, what would you like to tell us about that clip?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the audio quality was like for everyone. It was a bit fuzzy on my end, but hopefully you could hear something of the colors and the textures in there.
Yeah, it sounded pretty good over here anyway.
Okay, great. That's good. No, there's so at least some of the detail are coming through. Yeah, I don't want to give too much of the story away, but we find ourselves often early on in these stories wanting to give a sense of the gravity of the situation without giving too much away. The professor, who's the character we've seen on the screen, is retrieving a very important device, which turns out to be quite important to the plot development, and it's something he's hidden away. I suppose the musical palette is somewhere between the idea of it is to show something of the gravity of the story. There's almost a kind of, as with lots of sci-fi films, a kind of a quasi-religious feel about the story. I remember after a few beers with the producer and director, I kind of summarized the whole plot as being the whole thing is about sacrifice. And I guess I've tried with the score to give a sense that this is a kind of a noble character, a noble story, someone who's going out of their way to help. I think that's as much as I can say without giving up the whole plot.
Okay. I love the cello theme there. Is that something used throughout to represent the professor, or more just the?
Yeah, it's a thing that comes back. I guess it's a. I didn't necessarily give it a name. Maybe you could call it Professor's theme. Yeah, there's a couple of themes in there that come and go. But I had the luxury of, as sometimes with let's say indie features or low budget features, there's not the luxury of recording with live musicians, but fortunately we did have a pretty astonishing cellist on this, which was a friend from Switzerland, Timothy Bodbol, who was brilliant, out of this world player.
Very cool. Yeah. So all right, well, why don't we move ahead to your second clip then, and if there's something you want to do to set it up, say something, or if not, we'll just start it. Okay.
You're late. I was hoping you'd been shot.
Yeah, well, we got caught up in something.
Yeah, well, I don't like waiting.
Yeah, well, we're here now.
Yeah, I can see that. Who's the bird?
Careful.
A friend.
You know, a lot of people are looking for you.
That's why we're here. Is everything ready? And?
In the glove box.
No, that's not what I meant.
Like, you can take the car. You're not getting anything else of mine.
Understood. Let's go.
Wait. They're tracking your phone. Pass it.
You're lucky.
Very nice. What can you tell us a little bit about that?
It's an interesting scene, this. I think Schumann, the director, didn't have any music in mind for the scene. In fact, I think his preference throughout the film was to go kind of sparse on the music score, which I always find a challenge to kind of go against what the initial idea is of the director, of the production team. And I think it's quite, I find it quite liberating just to ignore whatever temp music is in there, whatever ideas are presented to you, and just kind of go free reign, start from scratch. How would I want to score this? How can I add to this story? How can I improve the drama or support the characterization or support the sense of tension in every scene. And so I think this scene, for example, there was nothing planned. There was nothing in the temp. There was nothing going to be there. And I had a feeling that we should know that the person we're meeting is a friend, that this is someone on the journey of the story that helps us. And I think, you know, if I think about themes within the film, sacrifice is one, friendship is another. And yeah, I again had the luxury of a live violinist who played beautifully on this scene for me. And it ended up making it in. So
yeah, what was the director's response when he saw your ideas for the music?
I think universally everything was approved, apart from just in the early process. I just wanted to get a sense of what they might like. And you know, when you have that first, I'm sure all the composers in the panel, all of you will remember the first time you play the music to someone for a project. You want to have something in your back pocket just in case they don't like it. So you do what you think's right, and then you write a few things that are completely different. And I just didn't know whether they wanted something a bit cooler, like a bit more funky. So I wrote something, I think, like a quasi-electric funk kind of track to kind of work out whether they wanted something different, and then they hated it. So that was the only thing that they didn't make it. And my kind of general idea of, I guess, the combination of electric synths and just the single live instruments blended quite well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a nice way to get the sound just defined early too, with your director, so you know which direction you're going.
Sure.
But was he? I mean, you had mentioned this scene. He wasn't intending to have music initially, but I guess he was happy with it when it came in. He was maybe a little surprised.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we had a spotting session where I'd written a few cues, and I think this was one of the ones that I just went off piste and did my own thing. I have found actually in a couple of projects where I've gone against the grain of what's been asked for, there's been that moment of, oh, we weren't expecting that, and then, that's really nice. Whereas if you kind of just do exactly what's been asked, then you're always kind of trying to get into the head of the person who's asking you to do it, and you're like, well, why don't you write the music?
Yeah, right, exactly. Why hire a composer if they're not going to get some of your original ideas in there too?
And that comes down to not just musical choices, but also placement and where an editor might be in the temp trying to give pace to a scene in order to cut it. That doesn't necessarily mean that when you come to look at the whole thing, you want there to be a piece of music in there which gives you pace and direction. You might actually in that moment want to take a step back and give something of emotion or show something different. So yeah, I've been quite successful in ignoring temps.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, because you have to sort of psychologically be willing to go against what maybe the editor had been thinking, or
sure.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah. So, Erwann, okay, you're next up. Why don't you let's get your first cue queued up, and is there anything you want to say to set it up, or should we just play it? I'm sorry, Erwann. Yeah.
It is the opening of Simon's Got a Gift, and I would like to show you the scene without music, if it's possible. Just because Leo Karman, the director, wanted me to immediately show in what genre of cinema we are. We are in a fantasy, a film where everything could happen, even a guy who can transform himself. So the very first scene is not so it's expressive in itself. I mean the mise en scène, the way he puts lights and camera movements, it's speak on itself. But he wanted the audience to be immediately into a genre, particular genre. So when I discovered the first scene, it was like that.
Into a particular genre, is that what you were saying? I was just gonna we were just gonna play about 30 seconds of it without the music. Sorry to cut it off.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna leave my mute off. I don't think I'm
cuts.
the one tapping, and then I will feedbacking, and then I'll stop doing that. Do you want to play the full opening, Valentin and Violet?
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Bonjour, je pourrais avoir une barbe à papa,
Je l'ai semblé là.
s'il vous plaît?
€2, s'il vous plaît. Votre monnaie?
Okay, so
I love that opening because that character is such a. I mean, it's the only time you see him like that. And not to spoiler alert, but it's just going back and seeing that after seeing the rest of the film. I sort of forgot that opening, which kind of doesn't the same way again. But what would you like to?
I think the reason why the director asked me to do the music of this film is because he thinks my music can bring magic to a film, and he needed really that. But because he thought his film needs music who really make us believe the impossible. So as soon as the film opens, he wanted the music to be very wide, and that's why I use these chords with polytonality and very sci-fi aesthetic. I think if we had a music,
Steven Spielberg kind of it's almost got a Steven Spielberg kind of aesthetic, right? Yeah, like from the.
That's what, of course,
yeah.
Yeah, it's. I think it's obvious. It's our reference in this movie, and as a composer, is John Williams is a huge reference to me, and I had the possibility in this movie to explore all these orchestrations, very rich and colorful, and the language made the richness of the language he uses, and not only him, of course, but it is a chance in France to have this kind of fantasy, the sci-fi film. It's very rare.
Yeah.
Yeah, to have a director who asked me to compose this kind of music, it's a huge huge chance.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's sort of a Steven Spielberg film with a French twist to it, because there's a certain darkness to the story. That's how I saw it anyway.
Yeah, because the more and more we go into the film, after the story will take a twist, more dark and more like a more realistic movie. The fantasy part fades away, and we go into a more yeah, I don't know how to say this, but it's a more realistic affair.
Yeah, I mean, when I meant a French twist, I didn't mean so much the dark point as much as this sort of vague moral outcome to the story. But yeah, so why don't we get your second clip queued up? Is there anything you want to say about it before we show it?
Go ahead.
Nein.
Il est où, Thomas?
Okay. In this scene, I would like to show how the music could gives us a certain point of view with the story, the narration, the storyline. The scene is about transformation, really important in the film, because the Madeleine, the girl, discover that Simon can transform himself. It means he lied to her his whole life, so it's very important. But there's transformation. So we could have focused on the fantasy character of the sorry, the magic aspect of the scene, but we decided to focus on the sadness, and everything's collapse for the girl at this moment. So we focused on the music, very sad, and not a magical aspect of the transformation, so the audience can kind of take the place of what she sees.
Cool. Yeah.
I hope I say it well, but
yeah, no, I think that
Sorry.
got across. Yeah, and it carries a little bit of the magic of the transformation too. You don't lose that. You lose that
Okay.
entirely, but yeah, no, it's a wonderful scene. So why don't we move on to who is going to be number 3 here, Ariel. We're going to show the Farmer's Dream clip. Is there anything you'd like to say to set that up? Yeah, I think you're muted. Yay! It's not me.
Sorry. So for this clip, the protagonist is having a dream about a past life that he's trying to reconcile, that he's not quite knowing whether this is a dream or whether, why he's starting to have these these repeated and consistent visions. So this is an example of the score that kind of brings us into a fantasy spiritual world and then anchors us back into present. It's hard. I think the audio quality on all these clips is a little hard to come through with the detail, but you can kind of, you can tell you got the general sense of that. The next clip is now much later into the film, when the puzzle is kind of being sorted out and the cause of these dreams, and the kind of the more sinister background of what's happening is revealed.
The connectome wants more data.
Okay, we'll get you back in as soon as the refractory period is over.
No. It already has a complete copy of my neurosystems. The memories of my present life are too tangled up with the memories of my past lives. The connectome has shown me this. There's no way to study the roots without pulling up the tree and killing it. We need a fresh start.
You're talking about monitoring the brain from birth.
More like planting a seed, waiting patiently, and after maturation, harvesting the fruits. Our work here will be of great benefit to humanity. Of course, we will have to plant many seeds to ensure that one will grow.
Cool. Such a wide variety of sounds in the score.
Yeah, there was, for some of the dream sequences, it's a bit more organic orchestral textures, and then for the more sinister explanation of things and the connectome, it becomes much more electronic. And so, yeah, I mean, some of my influences for that score were, of course, Blade Runner and Ex Machina, you know, and we also used some, so the director, Jake, he also played on it. He had a stringed instrument that he lives in Cambodia, and I'm not sure. Yeah, I think he is there now. And so he picked up several instruments from there and played on some. But in general, it was it's orchestral and electronic. It was a total blast. I really loved working on that film.
Cool. Yeah, there's some earlier parts in the score with some percussive stuff that's really cool. Also.
Yep.
And I think when I was watching it, it seemed to me that some of the ethnic instruments sort of became more pronounced as you got more into the dream sequence. Maybe some of the bell sounds. I'm not exactly sure if those were synths or where some of that came
Yeah,
from.
in one of the very early dream sequences, there is, but for the most part, it's largely electronic and orchestral textures.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for sharing those with us.
Of course.
All right, Alex. So Alex is going to show us a clip from each of his films. First one was going to be from A Shot in the Dark, which is his feature here. Anything you want to do to set that up, Alex?
Yeah. So this one's more of a horror movie. This is not a sci-fi flick. So just preparing you for that. I guess I'll talk more about it after. Plus, I can't really tell much about it. This is really close to the end of the film, and I don't.
I don't have a problem with spoilers for the point of this conversation, so that's entirely up to you.
Oh, that's fair. Okay, I'll talk about it after.
Okay. I think that started a little bit late, Valentin. Could you back that up a little bit? Because you were sort of a few moments.
Okay, so that scene, from what you could hear, that is the end of the film where it kind of reveals that the entire location is somewhere where you didn't expect. It was kind of more, yeah, it just kind of reveals a twist, I guess. I don't want to go too much into it because I think for some people who haven't seen it, I don't want to get choked out by the director. So.
No, it's a unique twist too. I don't know if I can think of another movie that kind of is built around that concept.
Yeah, it was that score was fun. It's I like doing hybrid scores as well, mainly to hide the artifice of like the orchestral programming. So I just kind of embrace that, since most of the times I don't really have a budget for like real studio musicians. So that a lot of that was like synth, like a lot of bending synth, and I also I have like a lot of bowed metal instruments. So like I would like bow it, and then like in post I would kind of like bend it. So it's kind of like not to sound pretentious, but like a sonic exploration of sound mixed with like piano stuff. I don't.
Yeah, and I was chatting with Lane a little bit yesterday. He's at the festival here. We were chatting
Oh
last
yeah.
night, and I was talking about how well the sound and the music are blended together in this film, and I was wondering how much of a part you played in that. It sounds like, you were kind of through cues of what the sound design was going to be doing. We're really working towards making that happen. That
Yeah, it was cool because they wanted more of like an agnostic sort of approach. So everything is really cold sounding. But then at the heart of this like horror movie, there's also there's like a love story, which was fun because I kind of had to like forget during these particular scenes that I am like scoring a horror movie. I just kind of treated that as like, like an independent romantic drama for those scenes. And it's very different tonally. It's like a lot of guitar for that, sort of like Porcupine Tree or Explosions in the Sky sort of stuff. And then you have that like shrill sort of more tonal sound design stuff right at that end part there. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
Out there.
Do you want to show us your clip from the Gazer now? Is there something to set up there?
I think I should talk about it after. I think that makes more sense.
Okay.
Night.
Okay, yeah. So the premise of this film is that every night, essentially, this guy he's obsessed with aliens, and he's like sure they exist. So he'll go out and he'll stare at the sky, trying to see and track them and find them. So for that cue, it's kind of big because like every night to him, there's sort of like this epic adventure that usually just ends in disappointment. And I tried using that cello, it's like a very lonely, lonely instrument in that particular cue. And I guess for a lot of these sci-fi movies, it's kind of inescapable to not mention the Spielberg influence. If you listen to that score, it's very sort of Spielberg-esque, vastly different from Shot in the Dark, which is just, well, dark, I guess. Yeah.
Maybe it's like a sense of hope or something that Spielberg has in all those scores that comes through, maybe with like sort of subdominant harmonies or something. But yeah, cool, really nice.
Yeah, thanks. I also want to say awesome job to you guys too. That was like your guys' work is fantastic. I was able to listen to a little bit of Edward's music and Erwann's music. I think I found Beyond Existence on your website, and then I was able to find Simon's Gift on Spotify. Fantastic work. Ariel, I didn't have a chance. I was looking for your work. I couldn't find it, especially for this the film that's screening, but hearing it, even though the quality, it's hard to kind of hear everything. I could already tell like your work with textures is like very much like something I love to strive for. So is it available anywhere?
I mean, actually, that's screening at the festival, and if anybody wants a pass to see any of the online offerings, just send me an email, and I'll make sure you guys have a pass. You can watch any of that. I think I don't remember if the Gazer is showing in person or online, but anything that's showing online, you guys can watch. Simon is online. Beyond Existence, I think, is online. Karmalink is online. So yeah, I think maybe all of you have something online. So except I'm not sure about the Gazer. So okay. Before we wrap it up, I did have one quick question I wanted to ask everybody, because we asked it at the directors panel last year and the result was kind of interesting. And that is, quickly, what would be your 2 desert island science fiction films if you could only watch 2 films ever on a desert island? First things, don't struggle too much. First things that come to mind.
I'll go first.
Sure.
Alien, of course, because I primarily work in sci-fi and in horror, and that's kind of like the perfect blend of horror and sci-fi. Then it's just kind of like a flawless movie. And then, has anyone seen Moon? Sam Rockwell's in it, and I think Zoe Bowie directed it. That's one of my. I think that film is perfect.
That's a great.
Score.
Yeah. My favorite type of sci-fi too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ariel?
First ones that came to my head are Blade Runner and E.T.
Okay. Erwann?
E.T. for sure. for the movie and for the music, for the all the emotions of the images, the richness of harmony, of orchestration, or E.T. is really. And I would say maybe Interstellar. Okay. Interstellar, because it's huge.
Yeah.
I spent all the film crying, and it's transcendental, like, yeah, that's my choice.
The first one that came to mind, which you might call it a science fiction movie, I'm not sure, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sure.
Phenomenal mind game movie that had a big influence on me from a storytelling perspective, also from a musical perspective. So that was the first one that came to mind, and the second one hasn't come to mind yet. So,
I was going to say that John Bryan score. He was hugely influential on me. Actually, it was Punch Drunk Love. That was the first thing that actually got me into like, oh, I kind of want to make a career out of doing this. So yeah, John Bryan, I get you there.
That is a great start, Punch Drunk Love too. The transition from the early parts of the film to the kind of romantic comedy at the end is great. Yeah. So I asked that question because at the directors panel last year, everybody had the same 2 films except for one. Everybody said Blade Runner and 2001, except for of course we wouldn't say 2001 because it's a song score, but or at least pre-written. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I was curious to see what you guys would say.
And what are your choices, Rob?
I picked Blade Runner in 2001 because I was thinking you could spend a lot of nights on a desert island just listening to those films. So you could pass a lot of nights that way. And also both of them are just in general have a lot of interesting aspects to them, so they could hold your interest for a while. But so yeah, let me just go around and see what do you. Sorry.
So with my choice, if you have your memory wiped at the end, then you can watch it again and experience it for the first time.
Yeah, there you go. So I just wanted to go around and give you guys all a chance to tell us what you're working on now, or anything that you want to, let the audience know about. Why don't we go ahead with you, Edward?
Sure. I haven't had a holiday since July, so I'm a little fried. I just finished scoring the sequel to The Railway Children, which is called The Railway Children Return, which is going to be in cinemas in July, and also a 6-part factual season for BBC called DNA Family Secrets, which is about testing people's DNA to find out what they need to know.
Cool. Erwann?
I'm currently composing a French feature film starring John Malkovich, who speaks French in the movie, and an American TV show for ABC, which is the documentary about the murder of Jill Halliburton Sue. Maybe you have heard about. It's a trial is happening right now about Deontay Rizal's presumed guilty, but we don't know. He's in jail and he's about to he risks the death penalty. Death penalty.
That's right.
And there's a documentary who's trying to talking about it.
Cool. So you've got films on both continents coming out. That's great. How about you, Ariel?
I'm working on a lot. I unfortunately am in this stage where I can't talk about a lot of it, but I have 3 TV shows I'm really excited about this year, and I'm very excited about Karmalink being out there, and then one more feature film that it also is sci-fi. Yeah, it's been a fun year.
Excellent. Great. I'm looking forward to it. How about you, Out?
Right now, I'm working on a cartoon with the Barbara Sinatra Foundation. It's like the sequel to. I did one last summer for cyberbullying, and this one's on like just abuse. It's not a fun cartoon, but it's very dramatic. It's more aimed towards like young adults or teenagers. And then I'm doing the sequel to The Mutilator. I do a lot of horror, so if you haven't seen The Mutilator, it's like a 1984 cult campy slasher flick, and they're actually doing a sequel, and the original director's coming back. Then I'm doing 2 more horror features, one called Dark Circles and one called Butcher's Bluff, and I just finished one called Time's Up. There's a handful of horror that I'm doing, so that's what I like to do.
Excellent. Well, I just want to thank all of you for sharing your music and some of your thoughts about film scoring with us today. I think it was a really interesting conversation, and I don't know, I have this goal of wanting to find a way that film composers can talk a little bit more in depth about what they do, because I think even lay people would find it very interesting. So just trying to figure out how to do that. So thank you. Well,
thank you.
Well, yeah, and I will send you guys passes so you can check out some of the films at the festival streaming online. Take care.